Welcome to the On a Mission Mojo podcast, where I have the pleasure of interviewing impact-driven founders, entrepreneurs, authors, and business experts who are actively working to create a positive difference in our world. I'm your host, Lori Young, a branding specialist, certified master marketer, and a passionate advocate for brands that possess heart, soul, and an unwavering commitment to drive change for humanity. It takes grit, a visionary mindset, and an abundance of mojo to navigate this journey. And the stories I share will undoubtedly ignite your passion. If you're seeking an infusion of inspiration, motivation, and valuable insights to amplify your impact, let's dive right in. Welcome to episode 17 of On a Mission Mojo podcast. We are going to have a great conversation today. And we're talking to you, mission-driven business owner. We and our guest, when I say we, I'm talking about myself and my guest today, know what it's like to be in the trenches, know what it's like to get up every single day and run your business. It can be challenging. We fall down. We have to get up. We lose our why. We feel burnt out. We feel overwhelmed. And my guest today is going to be here to share lots of valuable tips on how we can overcome these challenges. So coming in from South Africa, I'm so excited about that, is Emma O'Brien. She is a certified heart math coach and a Martha Beck Wayfinder trained life coach. She blends compassionate, intuitive, and practical coaching skills with her extensive experience in helping her clients shift their mindset and change their lives for the better. She helps folks get unstuck, recover from life burnout, overcome overwhelm, and reignite their passion and purpose. Alongside her coaching practice, Emma brings 2 decades of entrepreneurial experience to the table. She's an award-winning dog photographer, and having run successful photography studios in both the UK and South Africa, she's adept at helping her clients with small business marketing and strategy. Emma hosts the Lemons and Pineapples podcast, a weekly show where she shares life hacks, coaching tools, and inspiring, insightful guest interviews. Welcome so much, Emma. I love the name of your podcast. That's so cute. Pineapples and Lemons. I'm curious about that. Like, where did that name come from?
That's a story. That's a story that the name of the podcast came out of a plant medicine ceremony. So that might be a story for another day.
For another. Okay, got it. All right. It's still cute. Super cute. I always like to start with like you sharing, since we're all kind of mission driven, business owners that are out here, like trying to make a positive difference in the world. I always like to start with just asking you about your mission. What is the positive impact that you're trying to make in this world?
So I think for me as a coach, and I'm busy, I'm transitioning from a full-time photography business and part-time coaching to the other way around now. So it's interesting to be kind of almost back in a similar place to where I help entrepreneurs. It's been interesting being in the experience of that again. I help people who are stuck in their lives and their businesses to get back in touch with what it is they want and to help them come up with a plan to get themselves there. I think a lot of people are very trapped in the cycle of overwhelm. They're trapped in the cycle of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to get a different result. And often we don't know what we don't know. And sometimes it's just helpful to have an outside perspective of a coach. And like for you, I know you're a marketing expert, to have somebody else come in and say, have you thought about doing it like this? And can we streamline this for you? And so for me, it's helping people really get to their next level, to make progress to where they want to go, and to to shift perspective on things. I think a lot of the work I do is about mindset shifting for people. You know, we can sometimes have all of the strategy in place, but if our mindset isn't quite in the right place, the strategy just won't work, because we'll self-sabotage, we'll trip ourselves up. And you talked about burnout with entrepreneurs, which is a big thing, and I know we're going to talk a little bit more about it. How I ended up in the coaching space I'm in is as a result of my own experience of being stuck and overwhelmed and burnt out. So for me, it's this mission of being able to help people go through the same journey I was on, and perhaps help people not to end up so stuck and so burnt out.
So let's talk about that. Like, tell me a little bit about your story. I know you started as a dog photographer, so you were obviously running a dog photography business, and it sounds like you kind of reached a point of like overwhelm and burnout. Tell me a little bit like about that.
Yeah, so I actually started my photography career as a wedding photographer, and then the dogs became this very unexpected pivot about 10 years ago. So my father's an entrepreneur, and I used to work for him. So I've grown up in a house of running your own business. So I think I'm quite lucky in that I know what it looks like. I've also had a particular way of doing it modeled to me, which is working very, very hard. And that's what I did for a good 12 years. So I had a photography business in the UK, and then I moved to South Africa in 2009, and I restarted my business. So I've kind of started it up twice. And I got to the point of being successful. Anybody with just audio, I'm using air quotes for successful, in that I was working 7 days a week. I was fully booked with clients. I was busy on externally looking successful, but internally I was exhausted, burnt out. I'd lost touch with my creativity, and I wasn't making any money, which is ridiculous when you look at how hard I was working. But it's not always about working hard.
Sure.
And it was at that point I kind of really hit a wall.
This is true.
Yep. And I'd really hit a wall in the business, and I got to the point where I knew I needed to change something. I had absolutely no idea what to do. I'd got to the verge where I almost jacked the photography business in, because I'd fallen out of love with the creative side of it, which was why I started it in the first place.
Right.
And I stumbled across a business coach who also had been a photographer, had been on a similar journey to me. And we started working together and literally redesigned my business and completely changed it, which was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And I think that for me is having gone through that process and having seen how powerful working on your mindset can be, seeing how powerful it is to have a different strategy in place and to have that support, has been what's brought me now to a coaching space. Alongside the dog photography. I won't ever not do the dog photography. It's just adjusting the balance of how it's happening, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I relate completely to the burnout, and I relate completely to having to like shift mindset, having to like restructure the business. This happened for me towards the end of last year. As a matter of fact, I was, working hard. I was not getting the results that I wanted to get. I'd lost my passion. It was funny because it's like I noticed that there were certain things that I was doing in my business like just really lit me on fire, and then certain things in my business that I was doing that was just draining the life out of me. And I remember like towards the end, I was probably October, November, and I'd been going the whole year of just feeling unhappy and just not good. And my spouse said to me, like, something has to change here. You're not happy. And I didn't want to look at it, right? I didn't want to, it's like, I knew I still wanted to be an entrepreneur, that I absolutely love. And I even knew that I still wanted to continue in marketing, right? But something was not working and I didn't know like what it was. And it literally took a major breakdown. Like I just broke down and like I literally
Yeah.
cried for an entire day, right? For I just released all of that energy and that overwhelm and that uncertainty and everything. And once I released all of that, it was amazing.
Mm.
Like all of my creativity like came back, like
Mm.
all of the changes that I knew that I needed to make in my business came to me. And within a week, like I knew the new direction of my business. Like it's kind of like it just turned around, right?
Okay.
So I guess, let's talk about what leads to this burnout and overwhelm.
Mm. And that's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, these things tend to creep up on us. And I liken it to a bucket, in that you can have your bucket of tolerance and it can keep being filled and filled and filled. And you just keep coping and coping and coping until actually you get to a point where one day, like you, by the sounds of things, the bucket overflows and you just can't keep it all contained anymore. And I think this is a thing for entrepreneurs, and especially
Mhm.
solopreneurs, is you're on your own with things and you're having to do an awful lot of stuff yourself. And you're dealing with
Mhm.
the marketing, you're dealing with the actual client facing stuff, you're dealing with delivering things to clients, you're dealing with emails, admin, inquiries. Potentially, if you have got some staff helping you, you're dealing with them, you're dealing with family stuff, and you're also juggling the stress. And I think this is
Mhm.
what doesn't get talked about with running a business: the stress of, can I keep generating income all the time? Because it's your business, you are responsible solely for making it happen. And that is, if you think about it too much,
Right.
quite terrifying. It's quite overwhelming. And I think the thing with running your own business is it's never linear. There's never an even amount of income. Some months will be really great, some months really won't be. And it's learning to
Mhm.
be able to ride that without being sucked into a stress cycle. But I think this is where people get trapped. I know, because I've been there, of lying awake at 2 o'clock in the morning and thinking, what am I going to do if I don't generate some clients this week? And it's so a big part of entrepreneurship is learning to regulate that stress response and not to be sucked into it, because you end up then in your fight or flight or freeze response, which will
Mhm.
lead to negative looping thought patterns, which are
Mhm.
usually very anxiety and worry related. And of course, when you're stuck in that, you can't be taking action and moving
Yes.
forwards. And like you said, you can't be in touch with your creativity. And I think that is the hard part of entrepreneurship. And it's learning
Mhm.
to manage that, not get sucked into it. And also, for me, was also putting some different strategies in place, pricing my photography entirely differently so that I freed up time and didn't have so many clients to deal
Mm.
with. And then starting to be a bit more savvy with money and saving money, so that I'm now in a position where I've always got a buffer
Mhm.
in place. So if I have a month that's not so great, it doesn't keep me
Mhm.
awake at night. And it's just these things that it's a process of putting these
Sure.
things in
Mhm.
place. But it's hard. You said in the beginning when you were doing your intro, it's about falling down and getting back up again repeatedly and finding the inner resilience to be able to keep doing that.
Mhm.
Eventually it pays off. It's just we never know quite when. That's the trouble, I think.
Yeah. So I like what you said about the stress response. And we do, when we get into these places of overwhelm and burnout and trying to manage all of the things, oftentimes we respond in stress, right?
Yeah.
So what do you recommend that people like ourselves and all of these other business owners out here, how do we get ourselves out of responding to all of this with a stress response and
Mm.
responding, like you said, in a more emotionally regulated way?
Yeah, and I think again that is a process. And the one thing I learned with my episode of burnout, because I was burnt out from essentially just overloading myself and working too hard and pretending I was Superwoman. And even though I was sitting in burnout, and actually you talked about sitting and crying for a day, I had crying for about 2 weeks solid. No reason. It was awful. I mean, I can say being burnt out was the worst, I think probably the worst experience of my life. It was horrendous. And I tried to continue working through the burnout, because why would I stop? Because I'm running this belief system. If I don't work, I don't get paid and I don't have any money. And so the universe, because the universe is kind and helpful, right. I then put my back out and ended up in hospital for 3 days. So I got the handbrake yanked up for me because I chose to try and keep pushing through. So the long-winded point I'm getting to is the first thing is you have to take care of yourself as an entrepreneur. You have to be looking after the earthly vehicle, because if your body doesn't work, you can't work. You can't run your business. That was a very big lesson for me to learn. My life literally flashed before my eyes when I had a back injury, and I thought, if this is something serious and permanent, I can't work again as a photographer. And my back had been hurting for a while, and I just ignored it. And it was a big lesson for me to actually look after myself. So that's the first thing. You have to look after yourself. And that means doing some sort of exercise on a relatively regular basis. Our bodies like to move. Our brains function better when we're doing something. It might be yoga, running, whatever it is for you. That's the first thing, is getting enough sleep. I think that's the other thing. I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs who are up till 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get everything done, and then they're up again at 6, or they can't function. They're up at 8, then they're on the back foot because they're up a bit late. And enough sleep is a big thing. We need to have between 7 and 9 hours of sleep a night in order for our brains to be able to function effectively and for us to feel good. When you're tired, you're more likely to get into overwhelm, and then we get into procrastinating. So there's two big things, is looking after the body, sleeping well. And then the other one is just starting to become self-aware of when you are triggered, when you are starting to feel anxious, and having some techniques in place to be able to calm that stress response before it really takes over. And that's the thing that led me to learning to be a heart math practitioner. Heart math is essentially a set of emotional regulation techniques. It's nothing complicated. They're breathing techniques and techniques where you slow your breathing down and you learn to generate a positive feeling. But they're techniques that the intention is you practice them on a regular basis to build your resilience. So you are in a positive mindset more of the time. Because when we're feeling better and we're feeling calm, we're far more equipped to deal with the day-to-day challenges that come up of running a business. They're always there. They're never going to go away. We're always going to have a bit of a difficult client, or that's there. It's learning to soothe yourself and have the tools in place. So when it does happen, you're not derailed all the time. I see so many entrepreneurs who are literally just firefighting their way through their businesses. I'm sure you can relate with the work you do with clients as well.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that one of my clients actually is an energy coach. And one of the things that she taught me that I have found very, very helpful this year for me, is really about, I feel like my business is aligned with who I want to serve and how I want to serve. And now it's just like you said, managing those day-to-day stressors that come up, right? And I know for me, there's a couple of things that I've started to do. One of them is when I start to feel stress, like you mentioned, it's like, okay, I'm feeling stressed now. Okay, why am I feeling stress? What's going on, right? How can I approach it differently mentally and emotionally Or how can I approach it different, like physically? Like, do I need to just step away right now
Yeah.
and take a break because there's not much I can do to control this stress situation? Or do I need to like shift the way I'm looking at it, right? To create a different response. So that's one thing that I mean. The second thing I've been doing is she said something to me that just so resonated with me. And that is just accepting, like, oftentimes we get into this like fear place, right? With being an entrepreneur, like, oh, what if this happens, or what if that happens, or what if this happens, right? And we get overwhelmed with unnecessary fear. And one of the things that she taught me was to say, if X happens, right? Like, let's just say the worst fear ever is like that I never get another client, right? If I never get another client, I'm okay. I'll be okay. And that's really hard for people to say, no, I won't be okay. I won't be okay if I don't get another client. Yes, you will be. You will be okay. And I think that grounding of like, if I lose this client, or if I don't get another client, or if I miss this deadline, or if I this, or if I that, I'm okay.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't know about for anyone else, but for me, that's very grounding, very reassuring, and it puts me in a different like emotional state of mind.
That's it. And what we're looking for is to be calm and to be in a place where we can be responsive rather than reactive to what's happening. And to great points that you've made there. And another thing I will add on here, which I think is a really useful thing if you are starting to, the worry train has pulled into the station and you're about to get on board, is to ask yourself the question, am I okay right now? And the chances are the answer will be yes. So often we're worrying about the 2:00 in the morning worries, which is just, it's so stressful to be in that mind frame where you're lying awake at night worrying. And most of these worries are completely imaginary and never happen anyway. That's the funny thing about it, you know, but is often we're worrying about what might happen in 3 months' time, or what might happen in 6 months' time, or what if I get to the end of the year and this has or hasn't happened. We're worrying about future things that are not really applicable right now. And if you are able to, you know, if you're worrying about money, for instance, and you're able to say, am I okay right now? Do I have enough money to cover all my bills right now? Yes. Then I'm okay right now. And I can just take a moment to kind of ground. I'm okay. Let me get back into action with what am I doing today to generate more clients coming in? Let me get back into action and strategy mode and get out of, you know, paralysis and worry mode, because it's so easy to get stuck there. And then you'll find you have a whole day where you've done nothing, and then you're procrastinating, and then the overwhelm builds and the worry builds. And I think it's about being able to break that cycle and just have a bit of a reality check sometimes.
Yes. And I think, you know, let's take, you know, kind of worst case scenario. We ask ourselves, am I okay right now? And sometimes, honestly, let's just be honest about it. Sometimes the answer is no.
Yeah, it might be.
I'm not okay right now, right? I am not feeling right. I'm not feeling mentally capable of continuing. Like, I'm emotionally worn out. No, I'm not okay right now. And so I think honoring that instead of like pushing forward and I'll be fine, you know, and just keep going. I think it's important sometimes to just say, no, you know what? I'm not okay right now. And I need to step away. I need to take a break.
Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
oftentimes as entrepreneurs, we are afraid that if we do not stay in action all the time, that things are not going to work out. We're not going to be serving our clients. We're not going to get more clients. We're not things are going to blow up. Things are going to fall apart. The team is going to explode. We think that if we're not in constant action, that everything will fall apart. And that is just not true. Oftentimes we can step away and learn that actually things are not falling apart. Things are still okay. And it gives us the space to regroup.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I do think it's a matter of training the brain too.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with that? Training the brain?
Absolutely. And it's also, I think, for anybody who is running that belief of, if I'm not in action, the business is going to fall apart, been there, done that. It's looking at the belief systems that are underneath that. And that's a very fear-driven place to be, that I need to, and it was where I was at. So I say this with no judgment and absolute compassion for anybody who is there, is that was my reality for me. And I believed that if I stopped, I'd stop earning money and it would all fall apart. So I felt like I had to keep going. I got completely parked with no choice about stopping. It was awful because I had to sit with those uncomfortable feelings and all of that fear. And again, I restructured my business, which was very challenging in itself. But I now sit 8 years later with a business where I don't run that belief system anymore. So I don't have a problem going on holiday. I used to never go on holiday because I'm sitting with that. And actually, it's okay for me to take a break. Like I've said, I've worked very hard to soothe the fear I have about not being financially secure. That is that's been a big challenge for me. So I've got a buffer in place, and I feel better when I have that savings buffer in place. So I know I can go on holiday. But it's giving yourself permission, like you've said, to take a break. And we've talked about being in touch with what's going on internally, so that when you're starting to feel that stress, that overwhelm, that overwroughtness, you can go, hang on a minute, I actually just need to rest a little bit here. Nobody performs well 7 days a week, drilling themselves for 14 hours a day. You don't perform at your best. You're at your best for your clients when you are rested and your cup is full. And that brings me back to what I was talking about with the self-care, is we have to learn as entrepreneurs to take care of ourselves. I don't know if you've read, Laurie, or anybody listening has read Arianna Huffington's Sleep Revolution book. And she starts the beginning of this book sharing a story where she woke up on the floor of her office in a pool of blood, because she had been in typical typical what we're taught, hustle, hustle, hustle entrepreneur mode, working till 1 o'clock in the morning, running on 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night for an extended period. And she passed out and smashed her face on her desk. And for her, it was a huge wake-up call. And she just said, I woke up and I realized I can't live like this anymore. Because what am I doing this for? And I think that's the other thing to think about with your business is, why am I doing this? Because often it can, and I think getting a business off the ground is hard. That is a period where it requires quite an intense energy expenditure and a push. But you can't and you shouldn't be constantly pushing in a business, because there's something wrong if you're always having to push. And I think it's taking a step back and saying, why am I doing this? Because I meet lots of entrepreneurs who are miserable because they're up till 3 o'clock in the morning working, and they've lost sight of why they started the business in the first place. Often we start a business because we think we want time freedom, and then you find actually you'd have more time if you were employed. So it's getting back in touch with that why, because I think sometimes you need to remind yourself of that. And if, like you've said, you get off track with your why, what needs to change to get you back in alignment again?
Absolutely. And I like the question that you posed, which is, why am I doing this? Not so much, why am I having my business? Why am I, like, I know why I have my business, but why do I feel like I have to work so hard?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I doing this? I know for me, that's a question I've been asking myself recently, and last year, like, why? Like, what is driving me? What
Yeah.
is that belief system? What are those stories, like you said, that's driving that intensity?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things, it's funny, like, one of the things that I have found, and I'm just flat out vulnerable and honest about this, is I'm not sure I know sometimes who I am outside of being an entrepreneur. Like, I've
Mm-hmm.
lost touch with
Yeah.
the personal things,
Mm-hmm.
the hobbies, the different
Mm-hmm.
things that might make up a different side of me.
Yeah.
Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
now I'm like forcing myself to reconnect with a different side of Lori, not
Mm-hmm.
Lori, the entrepreneur that runs a
Mm-hmm.
business, but Lori, the person that wants to learn how to play golf.
Yeah.
Lori, that's trying to figure out, why did you stop reading? You used to be such an
Yeah.
avid reader. The
Mm-hmm.
Lori that's like, what happened to all of the creative art projects that you used to love to do? Like, why don't you
Mm-hmm.
do those anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that we do. We have to look at, like, what's driving. And for me, I think it's just that, like, oh, well, I don't know what else to do with my time. Like, because I have disconnected with the other side of me, the other pieces of me that I just kind of like shoved away when I decided to run a business.
Yeah.
Granted, I love what I do. Like,
Yes.
I love to work.
Yeah.
But I also need to learn to love other things.
Yes, it's so important, and I think again a lot of people get stuck in this trap. I've been stuck in this trap, and I my stepmom died last year, and my family are all in the UK. I'm
Mm,
here in South Africa, and obviously we had the global pandemic, and I had an opportunity to go
sure.
home and visit everybody in 2019. 2018 was a year of big hustle. 2019 continued with big hustle. It was all about goals and financial goals and success, and I'm going to do this. And I did very well. But what I did was I got caught up in constantly focusing on work. That was the thing for me, and I'm achieving. And I didn't
Hmm.
go home to visit my family. And then, because I thought,
Mm,
hell, I'll go next year. And we all know what happened in
mm,
2020. So when I finally
sure.
managed to step off an aeroplane at London Heathrow in February 2022, I hadn't seen my family for
Mm.
3 years. And I was going back
Oh,
to a
wow.
terminally ill stepmom. And it was a
Hmm.
very big wake up call for me of where I had been putting my priorities. And I had been putting my priorities on external
Yes.
success and hitting goals and thinking, I've got time for other stuff. There's always time for other stuff. There isn't. And I think, again, for me, this is a big thing I'm very passionate about, is that balance for people. We all have to work and earn money. That is a fact of living on planet Earth. And we should be
Hmm.
enjoying what we're doing. And it's great to be passionate about it, but it shouldn't be all consuming. And I think for me, going back to the why of having a business, the
Sure.
photography business, for me, I'm shifting into the coaching. I've been doing the photography for 20 years. So it's almost a bit of a time to switch things up.
Sure.
But I realized that I'm very geographically bound with the photography. And I've got two parents in the UK who are in their
Hmm.
70s now. There's going to come a time where I'm going to have to go
Hmm.
home if somebody's not well. And I need to be able to do that. I need to be able to drop everything and go if I need to. I want to be able to. So for me, having an online coaching business is something that gives me that flexibility to be able to be there for the people that matter to me when I need to be. And I have very deep regret of not
Absolutely.
being with my family when they needed me. And it is not an experience I wish
Right.
to be in again. And I think this is what happens when we get very caught up in constantly working, is we miss out on other stuff. I'm a big believer that we should be kind of working to live and not living to work. And I think entrepreneurs, we get caught up because we generally love what we do.
Yes.
That's why we set up businesses, because we're passionate and, we want to manage our own stuff, which is great. But I think it's also so important to make time for the stuff outside of work as well.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. I think one of the things that I wanted to just touch base on, as we get more towards the end of this show, is like any tips that you have for building this emotional resilience that maybe we haven't talked about. Like, we're going to, throughout our journey as an entrepreneur, we're going to fall down. We're going to, have to get back up. I think the other day I was so upset with myself. I was struggling with my virtual assistant, and we had some challenges, and I just didn't respond to her. I responded to her out of frustration, and walked away later going, oh, why did you do that? Right? Like, you have to go back, right? And I had to kind of go back and just apologize for that. But these kind of things like happen all the time, where we make a mistake or something happens and we have to change course, or we have to fix it and get back up, and we got to get back up again and keep moving. And instead of like, in the past, I probably would have made this mistake and just moped and beat myself up for, days on end. And it would have just derailed me. Right. But we can't do that. We have to be able to fall down, get back up, fall down, get back up in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Any tips on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So 2 things spring to mind. Have some support. So I refer to her as my work wife. So I have a work wife who is a very good friend who also runs her own business. So when I have situations like you with your virtual assistant, I might have a client or somebody who sends me a message and I'm like, what the actual... I will phone the work wife and say, you'll never guess what just happened. Because sometimes just having somebody else to vent at and talk it through with just dissipates that momentary that comes popping up. And then you've expressed the frustration in a safe space, and you can go back, take a deep breath and go back to the virtual assistant and say, let me respond to this in a calm way so I don't have to apologize later for snapping. It's so easily done. So I think that's the first thing, is have some sort of support system in place, so you have somebody you can snap rant to safely without then having to feel guilty and all those other things. I feel your pain. It's one of those things. The other thing is to celebrate your successes along the way. I think often we get very focused on and caught up with moving forward, and like we've talked about, being in action mode and what do I do next, and this is step-by-step strategies and constantly moving the needle and keeping things going. And very rarely do we stop to have a look back and say, look at all these things I've actually achieved. I'm actually very capable, and I'm more capable than I realize of doing these new things. So I don't need to get caught up in worrying about stuff, because look at how far I have come. And it might be something like, when you're next presented with a frustrating virtual assistant scenario, you respond differently, because you catch yourself before you have you send the frustration out, and you can congratulate yourself on, I managed to catch that, and I responded differently to how I have done previously. I'm making progress. And I think it's so important for us to to celebrate the small wins and to actually just keep track of how far we're coming, because we haven't really touched on it. And imposter syndrome is a huge one for entrepreneurs. And that's something I think a lot of people battle with. And if you've got these tools in place to just help you build your confidence along the way, it's easier to keep regulated when you trust that you can cope with something that might come in the future if you've coped with a bunch of stuff in the past.
Right. Absolutely. I like the idea of, at the end of your day, of actually like writing down, maybe keep a notebook. Me, I'm huge into my project management tool. And so for me, I'm like so task driven, like with my project management tool, even just having a task at the end of the day that just says, write down the great things that happened today. Right. And just keeping a running list of this, like, I mean, there's could be just small little things, maybe nothing major, success happened, but even just really like training your brain to look for the little things that went well, like throughout the day, and actually being able to just kind of end your day with gratitude.
Gratitude is so powerful because it just refocuses this little brain that spends most of its day looking for threats and what might go wrong. Let's try and keep Emma and Laurie safe. Is to, like you say, to have a look at what 3 things went well today, and they might be tiny. It doesn't matter how tiny they are, but if you can find 3 things that went well, it immediately shifts you into a positive frame of mind. And we operate far better from a positive frame of mind. With an optimistic outlook, we're able to find creative solutions, to think more clearly. And that's so important when you're running your own business. So I love that. That's a really, really great tool that you've shared there.
Absolutely. So as we get ready to close out our interview, one of the things that I love to ask is what you feel your personal mojo is in the world. And for me, mojo is like your magical superpower, like just that's something about you that comes so naturally for you. And just, it's sometimes I think our mojo, we don't even realize. Like some of the answers I get from this are like just so cool. So talk to me about your mojo and how you maintain your mojo on a daily basis.
So I think for me, with the coaching, is being able to help intuit and help tease out of people kind of what's not being said, if that makes sense. So I'm naturally very intuitive, and it's being able to listen to people and say,
okay,
my guess is that maybe this might be going on for you. What do you think about that? And for people to say, oh, yes, I hadn't thought of it like that. So I think my mojo is helping people perspective shift, if I was to put it into a sentence. One of the things I love to be able to do, that it's been a skill that I have learned to do for myself, which I found really helpful with running a business, is learning to reframe failure and start to not use failure, and I say air quotes again, folks, failure, not using things that don't go according to plan or things that are perceived failures, not using it as an excuse to beat myself up, but using it as a signpost that I need to just be curious about, why didn't that work and what can I do differently? And that's something I think I bring to my coaching with my clients, is when you'll have someone who might say to me, oh, I'm really frustrated with my colleague at work. And we can go, well, how could we look at this another way? And if I close off a session and someone goes, oh, that's great, I hadn't thought of it like that, I can go out and behave differently and get a different result. I think that's my little bit of magic I sprinkle into the world.
I love it. It's super helpful because we all have blind spots, right? And we all need someone that's intuitive like yourself, that can look at things differently, or that can see things that we are not necessarily seeing on our own.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much, Emma, for being here. And I appreciate all of the valuable tips that you shared with us. And yeah, we'll see each other on the internet.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been great. I've really enjoyed our conversation.
That's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for tuning in to the On a Mission Mojo podcast. Ready to dive into more incredible stories of people on a mission? Next week, I'll return with a fresh episode to ignite your passion for creating a better world. If you loved what you heard, be sure to subscribe, leave a glowing review, and spread the word to all your friends. Head over to onamissionbrands.com for more great episodes. Remember, the world needs your mojo, so go out there and let your brilliance shine.